Good to go.
Good to go. Hello, folks. If you can hear me, please give me a shout out in the chat section.
Oh,
Okay.
there's some thumbs up. That looks good.
Awesome.
That's
Awesome.
a positive sign.
That looks good. Perfect. I have Siddharth with me. I'm just going to invite Siddharth, who happens to be the partner in crime for Unconventional Geeks. Okay. Yeah. So, hey, Siddharth.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. Right. So before we begin the session, thank you all for joining on a Sunday night. People who are in India, out of the country. I mean, maybe it's a Sunday
It's
for you,
Wednesday.
Sunday morning. Thanks again for
Wednesday.
joining it.
It's Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Sorry. My bad. I have gone mad.
No, it's
Okay,
okay. Every day.
every day is a holiday.
feels
Yeah.
the
Right.
same.
Right.
Every day is the
And
same now.
yeah. So it's a Wednesday. Okay. Right. So
Clearly, you're not working.
no,
Ujjwal, please tell John
I just had
he's
my
not
dinner.
doing his job.
Yeah.
I only had my food. Trust me. So yeah. So thank you all joining at 9 p.m. over here in India. It happens to be 8:30 a.m. out there from where John has joined in. Uh, Before we begin, we'll do a short round of introductions for both our speakers today. I'll hand over the mic to Siddharth to introduce both of them. Siddharth.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey guys, really nice to have everyone. We've got about 40 people and more coming in, so that's really great. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sid. I lead the enterprise business for India and Southeast Asia at Amplitude. And I've been working with Utkarsh here to sort of build this community called the Unconventional Geeks, where we try to bring fantastic speakers like John and Ujjwal here to talk about a lot of stuff around product, around engineering and sales, and sort of find people who've taken unconventional paths in their careers and see what we can learn from them. And yeah, without further ado, let me just introduce our guest today. We've got John Cutler here, who is the head of product research and customer education at Amplitude. Congrats on that promotion, John. Really happy
Thanks.
to see
My
that.
pleasure. Now's a lot
Yeah.
of pressure now. I can't just be a cowboy to do this now. There you go.
But yeah, John's a well-known product coach in the industry, and he helps teams make shifts from just thinking about data to actually making it an integral part of their product teams. Right. In his early days, John was a game developer and a touring musician, playing the bass guitar, which is pretty cool. And then we've got Ujjwal here, who's a senior product leader at MoveInSync. He's a techie turned PM and comes with 15 years of experience building products like OpenDunia and MoveInSync, which again is one of the early people in product in the Indian industry at least. So again, great to have you here as well. And yeah, now the floor is completely you guys.
Just before we begin, a small round of applause for Ujjwal for coming up with this topic, because it literally took us more than 72 hours to come back with such a good topic, and it was really tough for me and Sid. Really not possible. It was if it was on us to come up with this, but yeah, great job. This was really interesting, and you know how to kind of keep John engaged through the entire session. I'll be hiding now. I'll be back there in the backstage. If you need me, if you need Siddharth, you guys can call out. For the folks who are watching this, you have a live chat and the questions tab on your right. So whatever questions there might be, you can keep shooting those questions. We'll pick up all the questions in the Q&A round at the end. Right? Let's begin. Thank you.
Thanks. There we go.
Ujjwal, you happen to be on mute if I'm not wrong. Can't hear you.
Oops, I'm sorry. All right. Thank you.
It wouldn't be a call if that didn't happen. So
Absolutely.
you're
Yep. Right. So, all right. Congratulations on the promotion to from product evangelist to head of product research and customer education, customer learning, whatever it is called. So what is this new thing about? Why don't we start with that?
Well, I think it's an extension of what I was doing, but if you can think, I like to frame it, I guess, for the product folks on the call. If you imagine a company like Amplitude, we have our product, but with any new or relatively new domain, like being more product led or anything like that, you have to think about teaching and education beyond just the product itself. I mean, I think that we have an amazing product. So we have to teach people how to use our product, but we almost think of the product as an extension of everything that we do. So ranging from things like customer success to what I'm doing, customer education, even to sales and to marketing. So you think about category education or sort of craft education, which would be maybe what we're talking about on this call. And then you think about, how to educate people, how to actually sort of use your product. There's a lot in between there as well, right? So, if you're not asking good questions, it doesn't really matter what analytics tool you're using, or if your company's planning a year-long roadmap in advance and it's inflexible, it doesn't matter how you're measuring your product. So we really think about everything related to education. But I'm excited. It's a small team. I'm working with my teammate Archana, who's really incredible at doing this, and she co-wrote two of our big playbooks, the retention playbook and engagement playbook, and I wrote our North Star playbook. And so we've got two people really passionate about teaching involved, and a whole team also interested in teaching. So it's new for me, but kind of an extension of what I was doing.
Wow, cool. And why don't you also tell us about the book that you are coming up with, which has got a lot of diagrams and a lot of charts and whatnot. Let us, know about that a little.
That's a sore subject right now, because this is a really, really, really hard project. I especially during a pandemic. So I have my goal is to chip away at it for like 90 minutes every day, but usually that's around 11 o'clock at night until 1 in the morning. But basically I found that I had been sharing all this stuff on Twitter for maybe 5-6 years. And someone came to me and they had kept this big directory of the images that I had shared. And Twitter's not very accessible, but they had organized, and it inspired me to think about how to organize that and share it with people. But it's hard going. I'm working like crazy to try to hit this deadline, and I'm so humbled. I think maybe about 1,400 people have purchased it without having anything to hold in their hands, but this is driving me absolutely crazy. So I'm still like thinking about last night at 1:30 in the morning. My head is dropping down and the baby's asleep and I'm trying to keep going. So it's a tough topic at the moment. The going is pretty slow.
All right, but what is it themed on? So it's a collection of things that you've been sharing over past.
Yeah, it's themed on, I think, and this is funny because this is communities of the Unconventional Geeks, and we talked about that in the last session of doing it, but I've always swum between these different worlds of design and agile and DevOps and product management. And I think that a lot of what I share on Twitter, or even I blog about or I post about, is about the sort of intersection of these worlds, what I call the beautiful mess, or this kind of collaborative activity. So I think that that's generally what the theme is working towards, is challenging people to think across role boundaries and challenge people to think about, beyond one particular function and thinking about working as a team together. So that's a theme, a lot of what I write about and tweet about. So a good example for product managers, actually probably related to our topic today, coaching junior product managers, is the idea of starting together as a whole team versus necessarily needing to figure out every little piece of your effort beforehand and handing it over to a team. So that's like, for example, one of maybe 15 topics that I cover that I'll mention in the book. So yeah, it's tough going though. Wow. Books are hard. That's what I can say.
Super cool. So all right, let me begin with, we talk about coaching PMs or coaching junior PMs or senior PMs or whoever, and there are different categories of people who sort of join your team, and then you want to orient them to your culture and your thought process, and then maybe make them equally, responsible and productive. So in that process, like you've sort of, turning from being a product manager to maybe a product coach or a product leader, different words popular on the internet. Tell us a little about, people who are transitioning or have just, found memes which would say, okay, I'm a VP of product.
Yeah, I lost a tiny bit of audio there, but I think I got the gist of the question. Hopefully, maybe raise your hand if you can still hear me, because I think that Ujjwal's video is
Yeah, I think
okay. So people can
he
still hear me.
got
Okay, cool.
disconnected.
I'll take a stab at answering I'll take a stab at answering the question as what I heard, and then we can always revisit in a little bit. The classic trap in product is that everyone is so focused on shipping and so focused on keeping incredibly busy and managing all these stakeholders and doing all this stuff, is that even product leaders in a lot of organizations don't invest enough time in growing their team. And in many cultures, what I see is that product is viewed as very sink or swim. So the idea is, as the product leaders, you're seeing a product leader and you're going to hire people. And the idea is that, well, if they can keep their head above water and if they can manage this incredible mess, that somehow that's going to, qualify them to move up or take on more responsibility and do these things. And so the number one anti-pattern that I see, and I guess the positive pattern, the people who are doing it correctly, is they really think about, when they make this shift into a product leadership role, they really think about how to grow the DNA and the operating system of their product team in a thoughtful and disciplined way. And I'll give you a very specific example. So I described the anti-pattern, right? We've got a new product manager, throw them at a project, wait for 6 months, and if they haven't been driven crazy, we know they're going to work, and if not, we're going to go to the next person. Now, the thoughtful product leader or disciplined sort of leader in this thing will give that person examples. They'll give them a couple months to understand the domain that they're dealing with. They might partner them with a senior product manager to work alongside them versus just sitting there and throwing them directly onto a particular team. They might also find maybe a design leader partner or an engineering leader partner to partner with that person, help them understand the domain. And they certainly increase the number of one-to-ones that they have, and they increase the care and concern that they're sort of presenting to that person. So I think then, back to your particular question, as people shift into that leadership role or, manager of product managers, the tendency is to take with them that mindset of, ship. My responsibility here is to make sure that we're shipping. And the key difference is that now they need to think about the system that they've created and the environment that they've created, and are they growing people in that sense. One of the big challenges related to that, which we might talk about in a little bit, is career progression on product teams. Is that, often what you find is product managers essentially competing against other product managers to move up this very sort of odd pyramid within an organization. And so I would say that one of the biggest shifts as well is that, you go from a product manager struggling to get people to focus on your effort and focus on what you're doing. And now you shift in this leadership role. And if you're cultivating an environment that's highly competitive, you might not be working on the best interests of your company. And so that's another shift. You have to make a shift from being hyper focused on what you need to do, what for your team, and what you need to be successful for your team. And then you need to go up a level and try to dispel some of that competitive pressure and competitive tension on your team to create, so that all the teams get risen up. But that's a long answer to your question, but I think there's a couple key shifts there that can be really challenging for people.
Sure. No, I'm looking for long answers to short.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, A couple of great insights there, and I'm going to dig into each of them separately. So, so there are different kinds of people who join the team generally. They're either
Right.
the noobs, out of college, MBA, or maybe non-MBA, but high on energy, low on experience, maybe relevant product management experience at least. Um, and these guys sort of, because of their high energy, they want to focus on things that they're good at. So that you'll find them focusing a lot on features, right, and not on
Yep.
impact, right? So how do we direct them to get out of that mindset of focusing on features, because they really feel useful and productive when they think about features, and because that's something that can potentially be good at, as compared to more strategic. How can we make them make better choices?
Yeah, I strongly believe that we tend to put strategy on a pedestal, almost as a power play. And you see a lot of product leaders perpetuating that, where they in their mind, they want these junior product managers to focus on shipping. Even if they talk about, I mean, I know you're describing it from your point of view, but if we look at the broader perspective, that a lot of, it's funny because you'll hear the product leader say, I wish my product managers would be more strategic. And then you'll say, well, what are you incentivizing? Oh, geez, I'm incentivizing everyone to ship these things, right? So I think that the danger really is that unless you've seen this loop play out again and again, and I'm not talking about the sprint loop, I'm talking about the real impact loop. This could be strategic cycles that even last years sometimes, or months or quarters or anything. Unless you've seen these loops play out again and again, you can definitely fall into some common pitfalls to do those things. But I really think that engaging even the most junior product managers in the strategic cycle, strategic deployment, the cycles that you have of formulating a strategy for the particular products. And then also as a product leader, thinking about the bigger picture and making sure that these junior product managers can fit their strategy into the broader strategy, right? So it's very fractal in that sense. And so you talk to product leaders who say, I wish people would be more strategic. And then you ask them for their strategy and it's not very good. And so they're not really setting a very good example. And so when that strategy is crystallized, and when they aren't just doing what sales tells them every day, and when they aren't just walking in and asking people to ship, it makes it much easier for these junior product managers to think about impact and fit their particular things. So I think that the key, though, is that you need to present some kind of healthy forcing function, some period of time or something, so that the junior PM doesn't completely go off the rails without your support. And that's kind of just basic coaching stuff, that in the beginning, this is the problem with quarterly cycles. I actually really believe that a quarter is too long in a sense. You can do a lot of damage in a quarter. So sometimes when we create these quarterly goals for a junior product manager and their team, they go way off the farm. They go way into some strong thing. So it could be for these junior folks is thinking about like a 6 weeks, 6 week cycle. Like, how can you frame impacts in a 6 week time frame, and then maybe shift up to a quarter or even longer as they get more experience. So hopefully that answers some of the questions. I think it starts with you, number one. Number two, you need to really think about whether you're incentivizing them to ship, and then also asking them to be strategic. So you need to have your strategy. You need to create incentives that actually align with what your particular goal is. And then also you need to consider shortening the feedback loops for you as their coach and as their boss, I guess, around making sure that you're not hanging them out to dry, right? You're not just telling them to go off into another world and then do these things. So hopefully that helps. I think that it really does start with you setting an example. So if a product leader, you sit there and all you do is brag about the number of features that you shipped in a quarter, and you're not always refraining the strategy, then you can't be surprised if the person trying to please you and move, impress you and impress their team is not also mimicking exactly what you do. So it's a challenge. I think that strategy often, like I said, we put it on a pedestal. And if you're, for example, went through an MBA type program, there's so many frameworks and so many things, but they've never done it yet. They've never built products yet. So there can be a mismatch.
I think that beautifully transitions into my next question. So I did a Twitter survey sometime back, I think a year back or so, asking people, all product managers, if they think they're doing real PM stuff, right? whatever that meant to them, right?
Yeah.
And I was surprised, and probably you'd be surprised, that 52% people did not think they were doing real PM stuff. Right? So where does this mismatch of expectations come from, and how can that be avoided?
Yeah. I mean, it's like the joke, all designers in the back of their mind, there's Steve Jobs or something like that, and so every product manager, there's a, whatever product hero that they have and thing. I think that, I think there's two factors there is that, and this goes back to the original question too, about how as a product leader, you can sort of build up your team. A lot of building up your team is actually improving the product literacy of the rest of the organization. Because if you have, developers that are ticket takers, and if you have designers that are not empowered to do design and they're sort of forced into a box, and if you have executives that don't understand product, then you're not creating an environment. You're basically asking probably the product manager to take on a lot of sort of all the work across all those teams. So to explain to you what I mean is that I've seen organizations where the developers and designers were pretty product savvy, and you could take a 23-year-old product manager, they've never had a job before, and they've maybe done some internships or something during the summer, and actually ask them to be the product manager of a team. But because these other people are upskilled on the team, that product manager is able to not sort of take on the burden of the whole organization about trying to do everything at once. So when I hear product managers say, I don't get to do any product, part of me always looks to the leader of that organization and says, it's unreasonable to expect one human being to do all these things. It's like, I mean, as a product manager, in many not many, but if you build up the skills of the other people on your team, you do not need to be writing Jira tickets. You don't need to be looking in Jira. You don't need to be, managing up diagonally for 3/4 of your day. I always ask product managers how much of their day do they spend connecting with customers and helping bring context to their teams. And if they say, oh my God, I'm so busy, I only get to do that for 20 minutes out of the day, I have to look at the broader system, and I have to wonder what's going on in that organization, that their product managers are not actually able to talk to customers and are not able to meet with their team and provide context to the team. So I think this is related to your particular question, right? Where a lot of people get into product management and they don't really have a great idea in their head of what's involved. And then they get thrown into a system where they're sort of overburdened for all kinds of things, for every thing. So, I mean, Amplitude is a really good example. Our customer success team, I would hire many of them to be product managers. They know enough, and probably because of our domain and we deal with lots of product teams, but they are extremely analytics literate and impact literate. And most of them are actually pretty good at strategy because they're working with our customers on strategy. But having them being able to do that means that when our product managers are collaborating with customer success, it's not putting the whole burden on the product manager to say, oh, I guess I need to go and talk to that customer again because I can't trust you for your perspective, right? So that's an example where, because we have we've lifted the product savviness of the organization, it's not all the burden goes on product to try to do every little thing to do that. So I think this relates to your question in the sense that people have in their mind what they imagine design and product and engineering to be. Reality certainly is a lot messier than that, but our day-to-day is often very much dictated by expectation setting internally, and also the fact that other roles aren't necessarily like upskilled from a product standpoint. And so then the poor product manager is there and saying, I'm spending 7 out of 8 hours of every day giving status updates to stakeholders. And no, that's not product. You know, some of it a little bit, but like you shouldn't be spending 7 out of 8 hours doing that. So the person is right. They are not doing the thing that they are hired to do. And so they should think about how to shift their organizational thinking in that.
Sure. A lot of JDs start with the term rock stars, and it's been a while. I've been mocking that, in most of the talks that I get into. Like a lot of, and probably someone used that term and then became a boilerplate for a lot of others to copy and paste in their JDs. But essentially, I think you start with a very wrong expectation, to start with when you're looking for a PM, and that's where I think it goes haywire. Right.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting term, because, and this is what I was saying about sort of organizational incentives. It's easy to mock that rock star mini CO thing. I've done that a lot. But the reality is that in many organizational settings, the only way to get anything done is to be like that. A great example is kind of what I call pitch theater or idea theater. As a PM, your responsibility is for the best ideas to emerge and focus that on the most impactful problem or opportunity. It's not for your idea necessarily to be the winning idea. But it's back to the rockstar thing, it's easy to make fun of that, but lots of organizations highly incentivize the product managers to have all the answers. And so you're a junior product manager, or you're someone trying to help your junior PMs kind of become more proficient in their role. And it's like you can say one thing, but if the organization incentivize that pitch theater, put the product manager up there and do the fantastic PowerPoint presentation, the thing that's like the whole world's going to be okay now that they've given this presentation. That's an interesting thing. So I would say, I think that's where that rockstar thing becomes a little bit more complex, because you have to ask, it's easy to make fun of the mini CO rockstar thing, but is your organization sort of incentivizing that in one way? The other thing I think too is a lot of that's built on stereotypes that people build about developers and designers, and even people in the business. Because I think sometimes if you're, I've met people out of college and they've never really worked in this setting, and they'll say, oh, well, the comp sci students in my school just wanted to program all day. The designers at my school just wanted to sit and get pixels to be correct. And then they're in their first job with their impressions from being in university, or maybe at a prior company, an early company, and they say, well, they're not even interested in what I do. Like, of course I need to be a rock star in this setting to do it. And so that's where I think as a product leader, you really need to encourage the junior product managers on your team to break down their stereotypes they have about the people they work with. They might not be as vocal about it, but I guarantee you the developers on your team want impact, and the designers want to be involved in the sort of problem exploration and opportunity exploration. So I think that's one of those things that when you talk about the new junior product manager or the job description, it's where people's initial impression of the role sometimes doesn't really match reality when you have to work with other human beings to do the work.
All right. Two things that, two more questions that stem from what you just described. One is that, a lot of people join, as a new person in an existing setup, existing team, existing product. So what's a good way to onboard them? They could be senior, the junior. I mean, they like experienced people or out of college kind of folks. What's a good way to get them in the team, gel with what your processes
Yeah, I
or
am super.
new ideas?
I'm probably, I have some extreme perspectives on onboarding. I mean, I think, and this is what I showed my cards earlier on when I talked about the bias to just get someone going in the beginning. But, you know, the funny thing here is I think this has a lot to do with personal motivations, because even when given an onboarding track, what you notice is that before you know it, the really sort of hungry product manager is, the leader turns around and the person's like, oh, I've already set up 15 meetings and the team's already going, to do that. And the product leader will say, but I asked you to take it easy for the first month that you're working here. And the person's like, yeah, but I have to ship. I mean, you just threw me on the team and we got to do these particular things. So I believe in sort of extensive, like 4 to 8 week onboarding programs for people that involve, like, an example would be, I want to see that person do at least 30 to 40 hours of customer calls. Just like you need to understand the context that you're working in. And so whether you're sitting on a support line or you're sitting with another product manager as they do research, or they're sitting with design, above all, getting the domain context very, very quickly is important. The second thing is sometimes you meet product managers, they don't even know how their business makes money. So no one in finance has walked them through like what the quarterly financial sort of projections or goals, and no one has explained whatsoever how the thing makes money. How does your company make money? Subscriptions. So unless they're a senior PM, and the senior product manager probably has some sense because they've been asked about how the product makes money, but a junior PM, how does your product make money? Subscriptions. Like that's not, how does the business model work here? And what are they doing? So that takes, oh, you're back. Okay. So that takes, classes from someone in finance, right? And to really explain to you so you can walk away with like a mental model of a spreadsheet in your mind about how the thing works. The next thing is that they have no idea of the culture that exists in design and engineering in the organization. So they're expected to collaborate with designers and engineers, but they haven't met with the design leader from the organization. They haven't let's see, am I still going? I'll just keep talking. I think Ujjwal got, oh, there you go. Yeah, you're back. Okay. So this is like this kind of, I mean, this is why I say it can take 4 to 8 weeks, because, the person has no idea of the philosophy from the engineering team or from the design team. They haven't worked alongside that. And then finally, I would say that what's interesting is that when most companies hire product manager, it is for the product manager of X. This product or this feature needs this thing. But I would like to even challenge that for a second. Like, I worked in an organization here in Santa Barbara where you weren't assigned a product when you joined. You had to become fully sort of involved on the product team, and then kind of slowly get ramped into a particular product area they're working on. Now, if you're the kind of, if you're listening and you're like, oh my God, that sounds terrible, I would start and I wouldn't know, and I'd be so excited to get going, and then I wouldn't have a product and I wouldn't know my team yet, I would suggest to you that it actually works a lot better than you think, in the sense that there's so much you need to learn first about the domain, that if you're not assigned to a team immediately, it actually gives you an excuse to get fully embedded and kind of worked into the culture of the organization before you shift into that. So I don't know, I'll stop now, but it's almost like kickoffs of a project. I think that kickoffs of an effort explain something like, 60, 70, 80% of the success. Yet we under plan and we under design the kickoffs as a general activity. And I'd say this thing about onboarding, I'd say that probably how someone is onboarded explains some high percentage of the success that they have in the organization. And yet again, people are just sort of thrown into the wolves in many cases, and that's how they do it. So yeah, I have strong opinions about that, but hopefully that at least explains my bias.
No, excellent thoughts there. And Yeah, I think at MoveInSync we just recently started this shadowing process where the guy would not be assigned a project and would just shadow a senior product person. Go into all the different kinds of meetings that guy goes through, and just learns for a few weeks, and then gets a project assigned. So I think pretty much.
Yeah, and a good mentor that's not is distanced enough from where your particular area can also be extremely valuable in terms into learning how to navigate the organization. And so this is where I think this is just where leadership really plays a role, the self-awareness as a product leader. So as a product leader, you have to understand that you have a certain power dynamic with the people working with you. And that initially they're going to be really like seeking to try to please you and position with you and try to figure out those things. So part of being a leader too is realizing when you shouldn't be involved, right? It's better for them to find, an organization I met with recently, they had a couple mentors, and, a particular woman, when she started, she was a little bit uncomfortable with her manager, but the manager sort of saw that and was able to position that product manager with another mentor who could kind of acquaint them with the organization for a little while until things were a little bit more comfortable. So that to me is also a sign of impeccable leadership, right? When someone is self-aware enough to know that they don't need to be involved in that particular stage to give the person room to grow. So I don't know, that's just something I noticed recently.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's very important. I mean, we another very widely and wildly used term is empathy, and empathy is something that you got to show as a product person for the user and for the fellow colleagues and stakeholders. So I think I think it's a great
So
exhibition of empathy.
especially, yeah, I think that it's very easy to forget how overwhelming it can be as a junior product manager, especially if you've been doing this for a while. And people don't even necessarily speak up. I mean, I was on a call recently, and they were going on for 20 minutes and using words and using ideas and concepts, and there were sort of junior product managers in the room, and they were nodding, on the Zoom call. And I don't think any of them understood 20% of what this person was saying. I mean, it was very much like hypothesis this and assumption this, and we're going to do this and we're going to test this and we're going to do that. And there was so much left. I think especially senior product people use so much, especially in an organization where they're very embedded, use so much like tribal knowledge and lingo, and they don't fill in the gaps to those particular things. So you had these incredibly smart junior folks who were just having trouble following the conversation, and the thing is it was almost like a secret language between the executives and the senior product person. And meanwhile, you had these junior people trying to learn. And I guess the lesson that they were learning is establish a secret language with the executives. Like, I don't think that's a great lesson to learn, but it's something to like, shared language is incredibly important with that. But my basic point is you take for granted how a lot of these concepts fit together, and you might not. So that's where, for example, as a product leader, writing a guide, or I don't know, I don't want to use the word manifesto really, but like writing a kind of, I've noticed this actually as a pattern in some of the best teams that I've worked with as part of Amplitude and before, is that people often write things down when it comes to the almost like the user guide to the product organization. I remember, I don't know if you know the company New Relic, but I remember talking to a product manager there, and they say, oh, here's an 80-page guide to how we do product that someone had written. And it was the most thoughtfully put together, empathetic document ever. And so I could imagine that as a new junior PM, like how valuable is that? And it wasn't a process document. It was more about like explaining these concepts and giving you a sense of like, how do you kick off an effort? How do you communicate things? What are the channels that we use? And so I think that that's also maybe a method to it's something that product leader should slow down and get done before they just keep hiring, and again, hanging these people out to dry, as I would say.
Right. Great insight there. All right. So another set of people, and again, may not be junior PMs. They might be, senior folks, experienced on some other product, right? And when they
Yeah.
join the team from other companies or other products or other departments, and when they join the product, the senior, they bring in their own biases and battle scars and their ways of working, and they need another sort of hand holding and onboarding, right? So thoughts
Yeah,
on
that's a
that?
great point. Sort of goes to the prior question, right? That like, I mean, you either work in an organization where you've got sort of boundaries, where you want that leader to come in and create their own culture, their own boundary, right? Their own system there. Or you want to have thoughtfully thought about the way, and when you hire that person, you want to be able to communicate the way that you're doing it. So I talk to more senior people and I say, well, what questions did you ask during the interview process? Well, how much am I going to get paid? What's the product? What's the thing? I've done my research, et cetera, et cetera. I said, well, did you ask anything about the product culture, the decision culture? Oh, I did. They said people work together. Okay, well, that doesn't tell us very much about the organization that they work with. Like, your cross-functional might be my huge siloed organization. It means nothing. It's just words, right? So I think that this kind of starts all the way up in hiring, and it starts with expectation setting. And so if your goal is to hire in a product leader and have them establish a culture, a sort of smaller culture, and you're willing to give them the freedom to operate that way, you should be very clear with yourself that you're planning to do that. And if you have a way, and if you want them to adopt the way with their slight little flavor, you need to be very transparent about that during the hiring process. The number one thing that I see is that people rapidly hire someone with experience, and on paper they're very experienced, but they're just, no one's ever thought about whether that person just wants to do it their way or whether they're open to working the way that your company has. Goes to the previous question. If you ask companies, how do you work? Many of them can't even answer. We use Jira. Okay, that doesn't tell me very much. We do, I don't know, design thinking. Doesn't tell me very much. Or you use Lean, like they just are not able to describe how they work. So I think that hopefully I answered that question. Is I think it starts with how you onboard that person, the expectations you set when hiring them, and then also being very clear with yourself about, so it's a very interesting phrase. I think it was Arlo Belshi or someone once said that scaling is fundamentally a question of what must remain the same and how much you're willing to invest to keep it the same. And so when you think about a product culture, the interesting thing is you have to, as a leader, think, what is the core? And that has to be just, if you ask everyone to conform across your whole organization, you won't get the kind of creativity you need. But you really, really need to ask yourself, what must remain consistent? And so maybe for your organization, it's like, we're just obsessed with going and reaching out to customers. I don't care who joins. If they're not willing to do that, then this is going to be a real deal killer. But you know what? I don't care if they do Kanban or whatever. And I don't care if they do opportunity solution tree or blank strategy. I don't care, but we really care about this. Now, another organization might say, we really, really care about crisp strategic language. Well, then you have to, that has to be, you can't solve all the problems of the world. You need to focus on that. So I don't know if that helped either. I think that it's like, you have to be very crisp about what must remain the same across your team, and then what you're looking for creative differences on.
Great point. I just take up a few questions that have come up in the questions section from the audience, and then I would resume my list of questions.
Sure.
So I see Malti has Malti from Gabi. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Data-driven decision making is the most overused term next to overused. But what about instances where data is not available? What about the things like data doesn't tell us? What should we be making decisions? How should we be making decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I have my own biases on the phrase data driven. I especially in the Bay Area, you find companies that are basically what I say data driving in circles. Like they're so focused on what you can prove beyond a doubt, right? That they're not taking any risks. They're not taking any bets. They're not thinking about the future possible. So I always make the joke that if you give a penguin a bicycle, the data will show that the penguin tried to ride the bicycle, right? That doesn't tell you what would happen if you tried to put a penguin in the Arctic or wherever penguins live, right? Like they like snow, they don't like riding bicycles. But if you have a captive penguin and you give them a bicycle, the data is going to say they tried to ride the bicycle. And so I think that that's like I think that this goes to the question of people imagine we either have data or we don't, or oh, in my organization we don't have data, and they imagine that suddenly, like, they imagine the Netflix of the world, that you go in like the Matrix and you pull away and it says ship it, and that's not real world product anywhere. There's always like a qualitative. There's always qualitative data. There's always sort of the unknowns, the things that are going to take a longer time to materialize. And if you're just shipping away at the local optimum, right? Like I said, you're not thinking about step changes that you might be able to make with your product. So back to the question, what do you do when there's not that data, or you feel your organization can't be data driven? We see this a lot at Amplitude, where initially the company is like, well, in our B2B space, we can't really be very data driven. We can't be like Netflix. And then you actually ask them about the decisions they need to make. And they say, well, we've got to decide whether we're being successful moving up into the enterprise, because if we're wrong, that means we need to change our strategy. Okay, well, what's the minimum amount? What's the minimally viable measurement you need to make to reduce uncertainty about that? Well, we kind of need to know how enterprise accounts are using this, and we need to mix that with qualitative, just even the smallest amount of qualitative research might be able to help us frame that decision. And then before you know it, as Amplitude customers, like 6 months later, they've just built this sort of measurement muscle that they're doing. So I don't know. I don't think I really answered the question, but I'm saying I think that companies should often have a chip on their shoulder saying, we don't have the data and we can't figure it out in their environment. And I think that when you step back and think about the decisions you need to make, and then think about like, what's the minimally viable measurement you need to move forward. An example with Amplitude is we have like a Fortune 100 account in the United States that wanted to like instrument thousands of events in Amplitude. And we're just like, instrument 6 events. That's all you need right now to make the decisions you need to make. And they've been like fantastically successful with that. So, I mean, I'm biased because I work at a company that makes this really easy, but there's no excuses for not having enough data to be able to like mix with the qualitative data, mix with the strategic intent, mix with the customer context, and then think about how to make decisions better. What I like to say is it's really about decision quality and decision velocity. And if you can, improving decision velocity with bad quality decisions is not a great idea. But you can't spend forever making the highest quality decisions, otherwise you'd never get anything done. So the question is like, what do you need to be able to make, progressively better decisions and make those decisions progressively more quickly? I don't know, we could go on all day about the data stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then I think Malti was right. Like, this is so overused a term that everyone struggles with. Now, how do I measure? What do I measure? Am I measuring right? Am I collecting all the right data points and all of that? So yeah, it is an important thing. And I think
the barometer that I use is, can we make better decisions today than we did yesterday?
Great
right?
point.
Or in a lot of organizations, the entropy that exists in the organization, you're just making progressively worse decisions. So one question you could ask is, can I make as good decisions today as I did yesterday when we had more contact with our customers and we did those things? So as long as you're making better decisions today than you did yesterday, or even just keeping it the same, you're doing better than a lot of companies, right? So don't let the data-driven thing hang over your head as an impossible mission.
Sure. So I guess there's this question that keeps coming in every talk, and probably you would have faced this as well. How much of technology knowledge is required for a product manager?
Yeah, there's some jokes about that. Like at various times in the last 15 or 20 years, like I've taken breaks to try to be a programmer. And I will get so obsessed with, I've made different products, and I built this product to like do personal challenges for 30 days. I made this other product to like do something with real estate, and I tried to do all these things. And I knew at that point that I could get so obsessed with it that I couldn't do it. There's something about solving that puzzle that's just so exciting that I couldn't do. But one thing I realized over the years is that by doing that, I have enough technical knowledge, even though I was not like a successful programmer or even doing these things, but like even picking up I would give you an example, like even picking up David Heinrich Hansen's book on like Ruby on Rails. It's a classic book on Ruby on Rails where they walk you through creating like a site. And you just need to go through the book. You will never need anything else. You will just be able to get going and hit the terminal and go. Just that alone will present enough concepts that you can be in an environment with other with engineers and not make a fool of yourself, and then also have some empathy to what's involved. Like as someone who's tried to do this and spent like 4 days trying to troubleshoot something and 40 hours, you understand then the next time you walk in or you're on Zoom and you tap the developer on the shoulder like, hey, do you have a second? Like, I'm sorry, the second, I've already given you the second. Like just go away, right? Like once you've done that, once you've done it, you begin to learn. You can't just walk up to people and randomly tell them like, you have a second, you have a second, you have a second. So I think that you don't need to be an engineer, but I think having gone through the cycle a couple times yourself can bring, again, empathy and also some understanding. That said, though, there are products where the technical design or that there's some, it really is part and parcel that technology is part of the space that you're dealing with. And it might be so what you see there is you see people who are maybe former engineers deep in a particular space, like a data engineering space or something like that. And that, like Dana on our team, for example, at Amplitude, it really does help that he has this prior knowledge to do those things, to do that. And so that's the feedback I'd give. And frankly, I'd give almost the same feedback for design knowledge as well. Like, you're not going to become like a professional designer, but if at least you've gone through the cycles a couple times, you can have more empathy for the people you're working with.
Yeah, I think that's a great hack, and I can relate to it so much because I've been a Ruby on Rails developer.
Yeah.
So I think I picked up that book and actually learned from that was the only resource that you had, agile development using Rails, and
Yep.
it's a great book, and I think bunch of other good books coming from DHH and Jason. By the way, are you on? You tried Hey?
No, I don't have bandwidth to try anything like that. I've got a 2-year-old, and you know what? To me, email's not broken. I'm sorry. Like, I'm pretty good at Gmail. Like, it doesn't. Like, I don't need. I don't need that right now. And also with those things too, like I always wait like a year. I'm such a slow adopter. Like I don't. As a product manager, I know I have a limited bandwidth to take something in initially. And also, I have to admit, at least with Hey and that stuff, is that, I've heard, people actually, executives say something like, well, they were able to reinvent email. Why can't our team doing that? And I'm like, because you've never given them the space to think about design. You've never given them the opportunity to reinvent anything. So let me know the next time you empower your team to reinvent something in your particular domain, and then stop talking about stupid 37 signals. You know, like I mean, I love those guys, but it's like it just sets this sort of weird like bar in the industry for things, and then you know it sets these weird unrealistic expectations for teams to do that. So I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts about that, but yeah, talk to me in a year. It's not email's not broken for me.
Yeah, I think that's that's it. Like, yeah, when I heard that email, they got a new email, and I saw that video, very impressive. But I just couldn't think about trying it out because just I'm just so used to what we've got, and it doesn't really cause a bottleneck for me. Yeah, so far.
Yeah.
And they've
Yeah.
got nicely integrated Hangout Meet there, and they've got calendar there, and just works.
Yeah, that's how I think. Here, okay, next question. Let's go. Let's more of the people's
Alright.
question.
Cool.
Sorry, we could talk about hay all day.
Yeah. So, all right. This what is the most valuable asset for a junior PM position? Is there a significant divide between technical and non-technical PM? I think you probably answered the second part of it, but you can talk about if you think there is something called as the most valuable asset for a
Yeah,
junior.
I think that what it is like a level of, I don't want to overuse this word, but just discipline. And it's the muscle that you need to really build. You know, like when you start out, it's like, oh my God, everything's crazy and we've got to do all these things. But, you know, I always use the example of like I met a product manager. She's really, really incredible at what she does. And she was talking me through her approach to like spending time every Friday and trying to capture her thoughts and trying to make sure that the mental model really aligned with the product. And she had quotas to customer calls, you know, and product is an absolute marathon. And I think that the number one thing that junior product managers, the trap that they fall into is that they get so distracted and so pulled in. And this is partially the problem with the product leader and the executives in the company, is that, you know, you ask them, you know, what habits have you built? And they're like, oh, I don't have time for habits. You know, this is full on and I'm the rock star now. But really, when you look at people who know how to do it, it's like they write the meeting notes back. You know, they capture their customer calls and notes that the team can read. They revisit their strategy periodically. And so I know this sounds very sort of pedantic and not very exciting, but I think that the number one, so basically some high percentage of product is communication and your just personal organization and habit formation, you know? And so people don't like to hear that too much, but you're literally talking, the number one skill in product is be able to do what I would call like gymnastic communication, right? Which is like, you have to be extremely flexible. You'll go into a conversation and you'll be talking high level, and then you'll have to go low level and mid level, and you have to be very like flexible from a communication standpoint. So that's skill number one. And a lot of junior people can't do that. Like it's very difficult for them to shift those levels so quickly. And that's a muscle that you need to build. It's not something you learn right away, right? Because you will be talking to a developer and they'll say, I'm not sure about this particular detail. And then in the next sentence, the developer will say, wait, why are we doing this again? You know, like why are we doing it? And you have to be able to go from that little detail to the why in 2 seconds. And it's hard. But the second thing is, so after the communication, like I said, it is about almost like a boring level of discipline in terms of like how you manage your own habits and manage your calendar, and you know, you don't sacrifice your customer calls, but you really are laser focused into how you can bring the most value to the team and bring the most context and do those things. So I don't know if that answers the question. This is more sort of like personal habits, but the junior PM has to practice those communication gymnastics. And then they also need to come up with a program and stick with it. And then maybe every like 6 weeks or so kind of adapt their habits that they have, you know, like that they're trying to do all the time. Otherwise, you just get distracted and, you know, you forget what you're doing.
Sure. I think I just dig a little deeper into that. Great term that you used, communication gymnastics, because if you look into any organization, and you mentioned customer success does a lot of good, a lot of good product management stuff.
Yeah.
But they come with an agenda of getting something shipped to solve the pain point of the customers, right? They have this typical myopic, vision. At the same
Yeah.
time, you talk to sales, and they need something glittery, something big,
Yeah.
to solve, to attract the new potential customer in the pipeline. And these two are very different, have different agendas, and you speak to them, and you need to talk to them and convince both of them on your roadmap, or their
Well,
roadmap.
I mean, the thing is that, I don't know, some high percentage of product management is just saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again in just different ways. And so I think that, the case with sales and customer success, if you don't communicate a powerful vision and think about their needs, is going to help them with their needs, they're just going to fill in the blanks with their product strategy. They're just going to make up. I always say is like, if you don't outsource your product strategy, right? And to do that. But I think that what that comes down to, like a great example, let's use the sales example. We want something glittery. So you have to be really empathetic with their needs and be like, yes, that human being is not going to make the quarter, is not going to survive in this company unless they have something glittery. But then here's like an activity that I do with sales. I say, well, what would the dream case study look like? Let's go case study backwards. Because if you're in sales, it's so much easier to sell when you have real outcomes to sell. If you ask any salesperson, and if you say, do you want glittery or do you want outcomes? They'll say, I actually want outcomes, but I don't have those, so I have to sell the glitter. Right? Like if you could just give me that case study, then I'd be able to sell the thing. And not just any case study, but a case study for this type of customer that you've asked me to go and sell to, right? And so I think that's a perfect example where you have to almost apply product thinking to how you communicate to people internally. Their problem is that they've got to close deals, and they want to feel confident in closing deals, and they want to feel like they have something to give. And unless you give them something powerful, they're going to go to the next best thing, which is a glittery feature to do that. The same thing with customer success. What I find is that, like, the worst example with customer success is where poor customer success and support is basically like hacking your product to meet all the day-to-day challenges while you're pursuing the fancy new strategy. Like, oh my God, we're going to release this new feature. And meanwhile, customer success is like, could you please just fix all the broken stuff in the product? And so, but I think that that's a very, very interesting thing. Like, there's one of two things happening there. Like, either this new bold strategy you have is going to be that good that it's going to change the game for people, at which point the burden is on you to try to persuade them to, like, please be patient. I know that this is really hard, but there is this other reality that we can achieve here together if we do it. Or you need to figure out a way to, like, align your personas and align the jobs to be done around what customer success is trying to achieve as well, and then do that. So even at Amplitude, for example, we work on fluency models and maturity models, not to like rank customers, but so that we can work with a customer to try to align the product goals and customer success goals to make people successful. So I don't know, I'm giving you two examples of like applying product thinking to those communication challenges. But as for a junior PM, they go in and they're like, oh my God, sales sucks. And oh my God, customer success sucks. But you need to step back and empathize with those particular roles and then figure out how to speak to them.
Great, really insightful. I think this is an interesting couple of interesting questions there. One is there an interesting framework you have to for setting up product culture? I think you've thrown in a few lights here and there, but if you have a framework.
No, I mean, culture is, if people had a framework for culture, that's like, there's so many emergent things. Like, culture is what you do, right? It's the corners that you cut. It's who you promote. It's the worst behavior that you allow to exist in your company. It's the best behavior that you reward. It's the tools that you give people, and it's the tools you don't give other people. Like it's just your actions into doing that particular thing. So I think that it kind of goes back to what we were talking before. I think that when we talk about design, it sounds like I'm talking about something that's like finished. But I do think that cultures are sort of participatory design in a sense. Like we're always sort of redesigning and designing the culture as we move through. So I don't think there's a magic framework for it, but if you kind of back up and if you think, are we designing an environment where the behaviors that really are representative of what we believe in are able to emerge? And where the behaviors we don't believe in don't emerge, and then you revisit that periodically, I think that's the most basic of frameworks that you can think about that to do that. But I think that a lot of people don't even think like that. They just say these things about culture like we're customer focused. It's like, show me, are you customer focused? And they're like, yeah, we're selling customers quarter after quarter. I'm like, well, that's not very customer focused, And so I think that like, I don't know, I don't have the magic answer for that because culture is so slippery, but it is the actions that you take, I think, is a good way to think about it.
No, I think that's a beautiful description of culture, and I think understanding what culture is would give you a lot of clue about what to do to set it right.
And also the ability that you can't control it. I think a lot of product leaders basically try to, instead of imagining of designing an environment where the culture can emerge in a congruent way, they think that they are going to control the culture. So you'll see them like hyper manage every communication, or and then everyone working on the team is like, that person's crazy. Like they're trying to force the culture on us instead of involving us in the creation of the culture we want. And I think that that's a huge, when someone starts behaving like that, I think your team starts to check out a little bit. And so I think there's that point of, the worst thing to do is to be like, this is how the culture is going to be, and we're going to just enforce it, and then it's funny if you said like, oh, our culture is growth mindset, everyone. You're basically saying like, we're going to everyone have a growth mindset. Okay, well, that's not a very growth mindset way of looking at it, right? So you've immediately invalidated your culture by saying that your culture is about having a growth mindset. So I don't know, you have to think about these things. Show, don't tell. Let your actions be the culture instead of what you say for those things.
Right. All right. So there's another very pertinent question. If you are in a company where they have a company where product is being run by features versus outcomes, right?
Right.
And the org is running at its own momentum, right? With potentially lesser effectiveness. How do you mold the young PMs to move, or what is it that a guy who joins such a team, such a company, can do to change things, maybe slowly in their own way?
Well, when the woman joins, the thing that she can do at that point, this happens a lot too, because I think that when people join companies for many, many different reasons, and it's not always because you're in complete alignment with the culture of that company. It could be in a space that's extremely interesting to you, like healthcare, and you're very passionate about healthcare. It could be something that you like to do. And so we don't often, it's ideal to think, oh, I'm only going to start working at companies that have the perfect outcome focused culture that I want. But we often actually join companies because we think, wow, if I could move that company towards a more outcome focused way of thinking about it, then that could be really amazing to do that. So again, this goes back to the discipline question, and it goes back to not having to ask permission for everything that you're doing. So typically, our fearless product manager, she joins, and the number one thing she can do to nudge that particular organization is to start her cycle and her team's cycle about sharing outcomes that they've learned or sharing information that they've learned and thinking about. So I use the example, people say, well, what's the product requirements document look like? And so they'll show me a template from the company. It'll just be all solution based. And I'll say, well, where's the part at the top about the problem? Well, that's not what our product requirement document is for. Like, we have to use this to communicate. So our fearless product manager, she would just say, I'm just going to start adding the problem statement at the top of the product requirements document. No one's going to fire her because she did that. People might be curious about why she chose to do that. But at the same time, those are the things that we can do initially, is to sort of lead by example when we do that. And so let's say that your task as a product manager to build exactly this. That still doesn't stop you from framing the outcome. So the example I use is that if you're writing a one-pager and someone has told you to build exactly this, you write the one-pager as if it's an outcome-driven one-pager, and then you say selected solution, or recommended solution at the bottom to do that. And it was really funny. I'm going to call out a member of my own team, but I was reading a one-pager last night at Amplitude from someone in marketing, and he wrote solution exploration, but then only one solution was mentioned. And so I just made a little note in the document. I said, doesn't sound like this is a solution exploration. This sounds like this is like a solution recommendation. And then I think they changed it, so I think that that's kind of like a funny, these little hacks can be useful to do. So this is like a whole other conversation, but that's how I would recommend that she hacks the system to sort of move it forward.
Sure, great insight there. I think, yeah, that's a great point. Changing small stuff here and there, you don't really get pushed, but you can definitely make people curious about why did you do something.
The one advantage of doing that as well, and this is, I'm not talking about on a company basis, because a lot of times I wonder whether my real mission in this is to actually help people along their career path and not necessarily companies. But any product manager who's tried to look for a new job and been in the interview process has had the company they want to work for. I was in this environment once too. Like, I wasn't in a very like functional product environment, and then I started to interview. And then everyone from the interviewers would say, well, talk me through outcomes. What did you do? Because those are the companies I wanted to work at. Meanwhile, the company I was at, I couldn't do that. And so the reason why what I just said is really, really important is that you're sort of in control in designing your career. And so you might not be at an organization that's very outcome focused, but if you can be very patient and at least think about outcomes in the way that you're working, even if you're trying certain solutions or prescriptive solutions, it helps your thinking so that when you look for a new job, if that's not the place for you, at least you've structured your thinking. Because if all you do in that organization is throw your hands up and say, oh my God, I'm working in a feature factory and it sucked for 1 year, and then I look for a job, but no one would hire me at the places I want to work at, my career is over. A lot of this is in your control. Like, you could have framed your work in that feature factory, at least from some perspective, as a set of hypotheses and outcomes. And you could have thought about, even if it was qualitative data, you could have thought about whether those things had the desired effect. So there's a career element to this as well.
Sure. Yeah, totally. All right. Is there any other relevant question? Okay. How frequently should a manager do one-to-ones with the junior, or other way around? How frequently?
I think that every week makes sense, but I think it's all in how you do the one-to-one. I think that a lot of one-to-ones are not great. It's like, how you doing? I mean, that's a great question, but it stops at that. There's not really any structure. There's not really any, prioritization of problems. So it's like, if you ask a junior product manager, like, how are you doing? And they're going to go into the weeds about the one thing that's bothering them that day for the next 25 minutes. And then the last 5 minutes or whatever, if you go an hour, for the last 10 minutes of 50 minutes, they'll say, oh yeah, and I don't know what we're working on. I don't know why I'm doing any of this. And so you've talked for 55 minutes about, whatever, and then the thing. So I think that if you run really effective one-to-ones, you can do them every 2 weeks too, because you leave an hour and you work on an agenda together and you try to really show good problem solving and good coaching and good facilitation. But at least initially, I think each week is good. But by all means, bring some structure to the one-to-ones so that they're not.
Is there an example of a good structure?
Well, I think, there's a couple. One that I can think of is, so I've used this thing popcorn in the past, and popcorn is like problems and opportunities, options, possible experiments. It's ongoing experiments. It's like you use the letters and you form this particular thing. But I really like that framing actually with one-to-ones, that you sort of populate a list of problem areas, but you can only really focus on one or two problem areas at once, right? And you want to work with the person you're working with to run experiments to see if they can push that forward. So in that particular example, let's say we prioritize the opportunity to connect with another executive more closely. There could be a couple ways that we might want to involve them or connect with them. And then we discuss, well, what's an experiment we can run in the next 2 weeks to see if we could connect with them better. And then in the one-to-one, you do the review. That's the R of popcorn. And then you think about your next step to do that. So that's using a basic Kanban board type idea, so that you're helping the junior PM sort of not try to solve all the problems at once. What is that one area that's holding them back the most? And then I think also making sure to leave time for more general open-ended conversations just about health and well-being, especially during a pandemic. Imagine during a pandemic when people are like, okay, I have on my agenda 8 things that we need to discuss. And then the 9th one is like, how are you doing? And is your family alive? I think that's not, you should reverse that. You should reverse that at the moment.
Yeah. Yep. That's a great point there. All right. So one pertinent question, I think the last one that I'll take today is, a lot of people, and we've talked probably a little bit about this earlier, but a lot of people have trouble with getting tech to respect them or their decisions. How do you coach them to solve that problem? Because, and this is literally, 2-3 unrelated people asking me the same question, that I go tell the same things, and this guy asks me 10 different questions. You go in and tell him the same thing, and he just agrees and does it. What
Right.
am I doing wrong?
Yeah, well, the first thing I ask a product manager is, would the team pay you if they control the budget? And what I mean is that, at the end of the day, let's just back up. Trust degrades for many reasons, and I forget all but the trust formula basically says you have to, it's your kind of ability, your ability to keep promises. I forget exactly what Larry's trust formula is really, really good. But at the bottom of it, here, I'll find, oh no, I see a picture of it, because it's really good to think about this. This is the trust equation. So in the trust equation, it's basically credibility plus reliability. Let's see, do you see me?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, great. Credibility plus reliability plus empathy or intimacy divided by apparent self-interest. So you need to be credible, you need to be reliable, and you need to connect as a human being. And then you divide that by your apparent self-interest. And that's your level of trust. And so think about that from the developer standpoint and the product manager standpoint. It gets super interesting, right? They might not think you're very credible because you're telling them to do stuff. And, they're like, that person's never actually done this before. You're not reliable. You keep saying you're going to show up, but you're so busy talking to all the stakeholders, you're never available for your team. Maybe you have low empathy or intimacy. You always seem distracted by the meetings that you have to do, and you're never really present to like listen. You're never listening. And then divided by parent self-interest, the product manager who goes and and talks about like the team or their success without acknowledging the team, all the team is like, well, that product manager is just in it for them. They don't even think about the team to do that. So to flip that equation, you have to think about your leverage against credibility, reliability, empathy, and then your apparent self-orientation or self-interest. And that's how to change that. So the reason why that developer is not listening to you is because they maybe don't think you're very credible. They don't think you're listening or you're doing those particular things. So I don't have the immediate answer, but I'm saying that like
that's a beautiful point you mentioned about establishing trust and all these factors that kind of
yeah, I mean, you have to figure out. I think that the first step is pause, listen, and try to figure out what part of that is. I mean, I'm not a big like root cause thinker because it could be all these things, but what's the cycle? Did it start with apparent self-interest and then you start losing the other things? Did it start at like 1 quarter ago? You said, we've got to ship this, and then no one's ever used it. Maybe you lost credibility. It's like an advantage of using Amplitude, I guess. Then, are you being transparent about the particular meetings you have? That could be, like it could fit into the idea of like reliability, that you're sharing the notes to them. And then also think about that maybe you don't trust the developers you work with. And so if you don't trust them for the exact same reasons, they're not going to trust you either. And so I think you have to unpack the trust formula to try to understand what's missing.
Awesome. That was amazing conversation, John, and I really loved it. I'm gonna go watch it a second time for the things that I could not grasp in during this last 90 minutes. But I'm sure that's gonna be really insightful and revealing. So thanks a lot. Utkarsh is back, and I'm sure he's gonna have a few parting words. But yeah, that was a awesome, really nice 90 minutes that I spent.
Yes, great insights. Thanks, John. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Ujjwal. Thanks for hosting this. Folks, if you have any other question, I will shoot out an email to you. You can probably let us know all the questions. I will have them forwarded to John and hopefully have all the answers given to you. Yes, Ujjwal.
John, what's a good way to reach you if someone wants to talk?
Wow. I mean, with the baby, like Twitter is good because it forces people to be pretty brief. But yeah, I mean, there's 20 people here. You can just email me, john.cutler@amplitude.com if you have a question, and we could connect that way too.
Super cool. All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool. My pleasure.
Folks,
have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Utkarsh.
I put the Twitter handles of both Unconventional Geeks and John Cutler's in the chat section. You can follow him there. Reach out to him with any question that you may have. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining. The recording will be soon available on our YouTube channel.
Great. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.